Yes. Perfect. So once again, good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here with us in this webinar. I will start sharing my screen. The moment I will do it, I will stop seeing you. So please write in the chat if you have any questions. So 1 second. And here it goes. I hope that you can see. Can you please just let me know with voice if you're seeing my presentation slides?
It's fine, Rita.
It's fine. Oh, thank you very much, Nina. So, as I said, welcome to our stakeholder webinar from the project SmartChain. My name is Rita Vasconcelos de Oliveira Bauman, and I'm the project manager of SmartChain. So let's start this stakeholder webinar with a slide about our program for today. So we will start with a short introduction to SmartChain project for those who don't know us. After, we will carry on with the presentations of today, and we will have, after 15 minutes with the presenters, we'll have about 10 minutes for a quick Q&A. Later on, we will have more time for a general discussion, and our final remarks will take about 10 minutes just before 12. Okay, so for those who don't know, what is SmartChain? So SmartChain is a Blue Bio project, and it hopes to develop approaches and tools for sustainable utilization, production, planning, logistics, and optimization with traceability of bioresources, both in fisheries and also in aquaculture value chains. So this is a project that started in 2021 and will end next year after summer. The coordinator is Sintef Ocean, and these are some of the partners that are included in SmartChain. So this involves Norway, Iceland, and Denmark. So how SmartChain approaches the problem I just mentioned from this perspective of blue bioeconomy value chains. So the objective is to understand throughout the value chain some of the most relevant points and try to capture data throughout these points that are marked here, both in blue and red. And we want to, of course, collect this data about the harvest, the catch, and of course, also the processing until distribution and retail. As I mentioned before, the bioresources are some of the elements that we analyze, but also energy, water, packaging, and so on. And blockchain wants to deliver at least the first part of a traceability system. How is SmartChain structured? So we have 5 different work packages, and work package number 1 is about supply chain mapping, while number 2 is about its optimization. The work package 3 is dedicated to circularity and sustainable resource use of both aquaculture products and fisheries. And work package number 4 is dedicated to the blockchain traceability system. And work package number 5 to system assessment and decision support. So the objective of SmartChain, as you can understand, it's of course developing these innovative tools, but also methods and solutions using the tools of digitalization to enable a better and more sustainable decision making while improving the quality, but also the traceability, the sustainability, and the circularity of the supply chains I've mentioned, fisheries and aquaculture, within this concept of blue bio economy. As I have previously showed, and more specifically, the work package one wants to map the critical points where losses and waste occur in these value chains and try to propose interventions to increase efficiency and circularity of the food system. Work package number 2 hopes to facilitate an automatic sort raw material using artificial intelligence models that are based on visual data and control, and create these robots to address innovative options for pre-processing some of the raw materials. In work package number 3, we developed sustainability indicators and established performance targets within the circularity and sustainability criteria specific to fisheries and aquaculture. Work package number 4 hopes to develop a traceability system for aquaculture supply chain for indeed achieving this much needed transparency and possibility record information about the materials, mainly associated with quality, availability, and location. Work package number 5 to develop a simulation framework to assess the end-to-end effects and potentially improve processes, logistics, and information flows. And of course, the work package number 6, which is the project management, which I am part of. If there are any questions about the project, now is the time to raise them. No? Then I would like to give the floor to Nina. And she will talk today about the drivers and barriers for the advancement of a circular blue economy in Iceland and in Norway. So I will stop sharing my screen, just 1 second, to give opportunity for Nina to start. The floor is yours, Nina.
Thank you very much. So you can see my slides, I hope.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
This is fine.
It's not in presenter mode, though.
It should
No, it
be
is.
loading. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So my name is Nina. I am a postdoc researcher at the University of Iceland for SmartChain. And I'm mostly working in work package 3 that Rita just talked about, which involves sustainable resource use and circularity. And this part of the study is more involved with our stakeholder engagement, which we did after we found the indicators and developed those. So that part of the project is nearly over. What I will talk today about is, I should mention that, of course, this is in collaboration with Sintef Ocean, and you can see the names of our team there. So what I will talk about today is mainly the barriers for the advancement of a circular blue bioeconomy in Iceland and Norway, and I will explain all these terms in a minute, because we don't have that much time to cover everything. Okay. Doesn't want to go to the next, yeah, there we go. Okay, so what we set out to do was to sort of explore the perceptions of companies, experts, and policymakers on drivers and barriers to circular blue bioeconomies in Iceland and Norway in order to be able to compare the two countries. And the emphasis, of course, is on, although I say blue bioeconomy, the emphasis is on fisheries and aquaculture, because these two sectors have enormous economic significance for both countries. Aquaculture more for Norway, fisheries more for Iceland, but these things are as they are, and Iceland's aquaculture is growing very fast and is owned by Norway, by the way, by now. So the main goal was basically to sort of elucidate the opportunities and challenges for further advancement of circular blue bioeconomy activities and strategies in Iceland and Norway. And as I said already, I will only focus on the barriers to circularity today. So what we did was we took 17 in-depth semi-structured interviews with key informants in Iceland and in Norway. We had primary industries there, fisheries and aquaculture, but we also had secondary or supporting industries, including biotech and tech solutions companies. We also had experts and research institutes and some policymakers and public institutions, though we unfortunately didn't get too many interviews with policymakers, but I will talk about how we are going to tackle this in next steps. So we had also 2 focus groups in Iceland with aquaculture companies and experts, and 1 interview with a high-level EU policymaker. We used the stakeholder identification matrix with certain criteria of what exactly we were looking for. And of course, we always wanted to speak to managers in companies rather than just employees. And we used the matrix to identify those key informants. And then we used Max QDA to analyze the data, which is a qualitative analysis software. This is our conceptual picture. I already promised to explain what we mean by bioeconomy and circular and so on. So what we mean with blue, first of all, blue bioeconomy, the emphasis there is on aquatic and marine environments, and it involves a specific focus on novel applications, including non-food, food, and feed. And the blue bioeconomy includes both primary and secondary activities, and other sectors may be connected to those activities through their services to bioeconomic activities. So that's why also our stakeholders were from a wide range of companies from both the primary sectors and also those supporting industries, as I already mentioned. Now, the circular economy paradigm, most people know what that means, but I will just shortly explain. It calls for the redesign of the linear economic system to circular system based on closed loop resource flows. So it's a way of increasing resource efficiency by intentionally narrowing, slowing, and closing materials and energy flows. In the context of the bioeconomy, we refer to cascading, which is a term that refers to the use of raw materials in sort of chronologically sequential steps, as long and often as efficiently as possible, and only to recover energy from them at the end of the product life cycle. So cascading use of biomass takes place when the biomass is processed into a bio-based final product, and this final product is then used at least one more time for either materials or energy. It's important to keep this in mind, because if we use biomass straight for energy production, then this is not what we refer to as cascading, at least in the academic literature. We use this analytical framework to structure and analyze our findings from the interviews and the focus groups. It's a framework that consists of 4 broad categories, as you can see here. There is the regulatory category, which includes sort of domestic and international regulations and strategies and roadmaps, everything to do with the policy sphere, pretty much, and the regulatory framework. And then you have resource category, which includes both tangible and intangible resources. So tangible, of course, financial, physical, material resources, and intangible, we're talking about knowledge and skills and so on, which are important to bioeconomic activities. And then market refers to sort of everything relating to customers, consumers, partners or competitors in the value chain, service providers and industry associations, and finally social. That's the sort of community at large, and it can include local communities, but also larger NGOs, the media, and it also involves things to do with image and reputation of companies and their sort of organizational values and how they react to issues like that. Okay, so then I just move on to our sort of main findings. As you can see, it's a pie chart, even though it's really just largely qualitative data. You can still sort of take this data and quantify it in an easy way. So you can see a simple pie chart here of how frequently these certain topics emerged in the different categories. And you can see already that resource and regulatory issues dominated the discussion in Iceland. And I'd like to just highlight a few of those topics now. So one of the major issues that emerged in Iceland was the need for mapping all waste streams, both in terms of quantities, but also in terms of content. And a few issues that were related to this as well was to do with the access to and the quality of the raw material. And this had to do with, for example, the increase in the price of raw material, which was, of course, a good thing in terms of the fact that it is being used more and therefore it's becoming more valuable. But it also means that there is less access to it for those companies that need to use it for value-added activities. So it's both a positive thing, but also a challenge in that sense. And the amount, of course, that goes to feed production versus food production and other value-added activities was also an issue of great discussion. Now, it makes, of course, good business sense to move up on the value pyramid from feed to food. But it was also clear from our interviews in Iceland or with Icelandic people and companies that they also consider it, many of them, as an ethical issue in terms of the need to prioritize food production over other activities. Infrastructure was highly discussed in Iceland. We have issues to do with waste and wastewater management. And for example, issues to do with what to do with waste from value-added activities, like any waste from collagen production, which is a value-added activity, and what to do about sludge from aquaculture. We don't really have the infrastructure yet. Energy supply issues were also discussed. That is a common denominator in Iceland with a lot of industry right now. So in terms of regulatory issues, some of the topics which emerged were the lack of institutional capacity, the need for sort of common standards and metrics in terms of what counts as circular, what counts as sustainable, etc. And the need for sort of long-term policies that can survive different four-year term political terms. And then, of course, the need to integrate those policy objectives that have to do with circularity with other policy objectives so that the policies align with each other and they're not at cross purposes. So as for the last two categories, the need for collaboration and partnerships was highlighted, especially in terms of value-added activities. And we already have some value-added activities in Iceland that are based on large companies creating a new company together in order to secure also access to that raw material, as I discussed already. But also there was a sort of the supporting industries and the experts we talked to, because we didn't just talk with the main industry. They mentioned that the fishing industry in Iceland in particular is showing some sort of resistance to change that needs to be tackled, and especially when it has to do with further digitalization in the industry. Another, of course, topic that emerged, that always emerges in both the fisheries discussion and now, of course, more recently in aquaculture, was a lot of negative public discourse about the industry. Okay, and here we have the Norwegian. So in Norway, we had a lot of discussion of climate change risks and adaptation, and also major discussion on unprocessed fish that is exported that way, so that the value added is not created within Norway because the fish is exported unprocessed. And the sort of need for holistic approach, so avoiding tunnel vision, or what some people called CO2 filter, and looking at the holistic view of the sustainability and circularity issues that we need to basically deal with and solve. And also the sort of emphasis on not just focusing on the local aspects, but also the global aspects. And this, of course, is probably a likely finding because the Norwegian companies we talked to were larger. than many of the Icelandic companies, and often operating not just in Norway, but in different countries as well. And regarding regulatory issues, this should come to as no surprise to anyone, but of course taxation was high on the agenda, probably because it was on the cusp of this new tax that was about to be passed in aquaculture at the time. And then we had, of course, large discussion about licenses for aquaculture and what it means for social license to operate in the future, and so on and so forth. And then issues to do with EU policy, more than this was discussed in Iceland. It was mostly discussed here in Norway. And especially to do with how do you increase circularity, how do you sort of use these materials across different sectors, not just in the fisheries and aquaculture sector, but also in the agricultural sector, and what to do about regulations that are not really very lenient on those cross-sectoral approaches. Consumer perceptions were discussed a lot as well, especially to do with issues like exactly this, using byproducts from one industry to feed creatures in another industry. That's, of course, a big topic of conversation. But there was also the discussion that markets may not really be ready for more circularity at the moment, especially because if we think about, for example, plastic packaging, which is something we also discussed in terms of how we package the products, the fish and so on. The problem is that, first of all, there is not enough recycling capacity, but also the material that has been recycled is not viewed as valuable. And it's unfortunately also often more expensive than the raw material, even though its value is not really perceived as high, due to the characteristics that are lost and the qualities that are lost during the recycling process. And like I mentioned, license to operate, that was a huge topic of discussion, especially regarding aquaculture, where it's going to be in the future. Is it going to be offshore? Is it going to be more land-based? We did a similar study on this some years ago, and at the time we found that there was skepticism about whether it would become more land-based. But what we're seeing in Iceland now is that it is, in fact, moving more on land rather than in the sea, often because of social license issues. And negative public discourse dominated the discussion in Norway as well, especially with regards to aquaculture rather than fisheries. So here is our original concept picture, and here's how we have added all our findings, which I didn't go completely into here because we don't have that much time. But you can see here various issues to do with regulation, to do with markets, to do with resource use and environmental impacts in the sort of broad perspective on that. So not just the basic products we think of when we think of fisheries, but also those products that are necessary to fisheries to do with, for example, how do we package it? What do we do with the packaging, etc. And of course, issues to do with innovation. How do we enable the environment, the regulatory environment, to encourage more innovation? How do we tackle infrastructural issues so that not just the public sector has to deal with the cost, etc., etc. And you can ask me more questions if you like. So next steps, we have to publish a scientific article based on our results. This is still in progress. And it's going to be a sort of comparative assessment between the two countries. And then the next step in the project is to look at the policy landscape in more detail. So we want to examine the policies at the national level in Iceland and Norway, at the sectoral level, fisheries and aquaculture, and then the regional level in the European Union, the Nordic region, and how those relate to circular blue bioeconomy objectives. And we want to use the qualitative data I just discussed to inform an assessment of policy alignment or misalignment, and how we can sort of construct a policy framework that would encourage more circularity and more sustainability in the blue bioeconomy, especially, of course, regarding fisheries and aquaculture. And this may involve contacting relevant stakeholders again. I'm just saying this in case somebody is here today. Just so you know, I may have to bug you again. But also it means having to contact more policymakers, and it's been a bit of a challenge to get them to talk to us. But hopefully we can manage. So thank you very much. This was my presentation. I hope I didn't go over time, Rita.
Not at all, Nina. Thank you very much for a great presentation. And now I would like to open the floor for questions directed to your presentation. We will have some time potentially to discuss more in general, but now we have about 10 to 15 minutes. So if I see some hands raised in this case. If not, I can actually start, and I can kickstart. So I was okay. So I can kickstart, and then I will give. Okay, Sigurdur, please go ahead, and I will save mine later on.
You're muted.
Short question for you, Nina. It's basically, you mentioned that to engage the policymakers to get more traction with the people that we need to discuss with. How can you see that this happen? How can we engage a wider circle of stakeholders in getting the replies that you need?
Yeah, I was planning to use contacts of mine. I've already talked to one person for a different project. I was hoping to maybe try to convince her to find somebody for me, but it's the only way. I don't know how else to do it. And it's much more difficult in Norway as well, because I don't really have that same knowledge of stakeholders, but Sintef has helped us before. So maybe they can help us again.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other further hands? If not, then I will ask some questions, or at least one of the questions I have. I was wondering, why do you think is this increase in this negative social impression and discourse around, both in Iceland and in Norway, around fisheries and aquaculture? Yeah.
Well, in Iceland, regarding fisheries, it has to do with the quota system and perceived inequality in that sphere, and also perceived power and asymmetry, so that a lot of people in Iceland feel that the industry here has too much money and too much power and too much influence over politics in general. So it's an ongoing discussion. It's been going on since the quota system was implemented. It's nothing new, but it's something the industry has been telling me, at least, is that it may also just connect to the fact that there is a disconnect between the industry and the people, increasingly more and more. And we are very urbanized in Iceland, for example, so most of the population lives in Reykjavik, and we don't really have this sort of close connection to the production anymore that we maybe used to have many years ago. So I don't know. It could be an explanation. It could also be that we're just having companies that are integrating more, acquiring each other, getting bigger, and the bigger they get, the more power they have, and the more they are criticized. With aquaculture, it's just, yeah, it's a good question. Of course, they have issues to deal with. I mean, I know that Norway has been dealing with these issues already, but in Iceland, we just had a huge protest on Saturday, just now last week, because the people who fish the wild salmon and want to continue fishing it, and it's a valuable industry to them, are complaining because the aquaculture industry had a lot of escapes of farmed salmon that went into the rivers, and that's a huge controversy now. So that's basically the main deal, I think.
Thank you very much, Gina. Yes, and it seems it's not going anywhere soon. Yeah. Anyone else that would like to ask Nina one more question? We still have time. If not, I would like to ask a second question. What type of insights, just in a quick way, you could give to, or at least from your context with the stakeholders, could you give to us in terms of this improvement of for the use of restaurant materials? Because this is a question that even SmartChain project gets asked many times. So now, since I have you, I can ask at least to give us one or two insights from your context with the stakeholders, what they seem to kind of want to tell us on that.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be a very new insight, but it's something that the industry has been pointing out for a long time. And it's the fact that if you export the fish unprocessed, then you don't take the value added into your hands. That's the main issue. And it's becoming an issue in Iceland as well, because there has been more of that happening, even though it's not to the extent that it's happening in Norway, of exported fish whole. And then you don't, of course, create these opportunities and innovation within the country that is needed for value-added activity. So that's the main sort of topic. But in general, in terms of circularity, the main issue is that, especially in Iceland, is that we need to quantify everything. We don't have the data. We need to quantify all the, not just the restaurant material, but all the energy and material that is going into it. And we're not doing it at the moment.
Thank you, Nina. Sigurdur, we have still time. Yeah, please go ahead.
Just a quick question. Because of the issue with the negative response to the industry, do you think that the new taxonomy legislation of the European community, where transparency of information is being forced on the big stock listed companies, and actually also if they have are large enough in Iceland, for example, these huge companies, are they going to be transparent?
They have to.
Are they actually are they willing to? What is your feel from the discussions?
I think they are. I think they realize they can't avoid it. Well, I didn't talk to all of the fisheries companies, and of course it depends on the company. Some of them have a different culture of secrecy and so on. But I think for the most part, I think we will see a bit of a revolution in how data is being reported here, because they just have to do it. There is no choice anymore. And the supporting industry is pushing it also.
Less greenwashing.
I hope so. I don't know.
Thank you.
You're muted, Rita.
Thank you both for your interventions. Anyone else now? If not, maybe you can save your questions after we have the presentation from Shraddha. Maybe it's better if you directly share your screen, Shraddha.
Yes, I will do that.
Thank you.
And you hear me well?
Perfect.
Right. I will share this, and please confirm whether it's in the presentation mode.
It is now. Thank you.
Right. Yes, so my presentation is about if we are able to achieve higher utilization of all the resources that we have in the seafood supply chains. And this is based on the work that we have been carrying out in the SmartChain project now in collaboration with Gudrun and Nina, and also my colleagues in Simple Ocean, Andrea and Magnus. And forward, the main motivation also for higher resource utilization is that both Norway and Iceland are important seafood nations. We export a lot of the fish that we catch and also farm in both nations, and we do have a future role also in moving towards a more sustainable production, considering that we are already exceeding the planetary boundaries today. We are emitting more greenhouse gas emissions than what we can in a way to maintain the safe operating spaces. And in terms of also area use and other indicators, we are exceeding the planetary boundaries. So if we were to grow and if we were to be sustainable, we need to focus on better utilization of the resources that we already have and maintain the quality, and also make sure that most of it is going towards food and feed rather than other applications. So with this background, the main aim and methodology that we had in the work that we carried out was to look at the fishery supply chains in Norway and Iceland and build a conceptual model of how these supply chains work, what are the information flows between the value chain actors and so on. And also, in addition to building this conceptual model, we look at what are the current losses and waste volumes in these different sectors, and what are the drivers or causes, and how much of the resources that we have today are actually being utilized for purposes for food and feed rather than energy or other low value applications. And we compare the status between Norway and Iceland, and we highlight what are the differences or similarities and potential for improvement, and also identify the barriers that we have today in higher resource utilization. I will go a little bit more into detail about this modeling technique that we use to build the conceptual model. It's called the material and information flow modeling technique, where we have one function. It can be a supply chain stage, for example, catch or harvest or processing of fish or transport and so on. And we have different inputs and outputs to this function, which can be materials, energy, and so on. It can be information and a possible information carrier. And we also have outputs in terms of the same material and information. We have some control elements that can be regulations and policies and so on that control how the function is carried out. And we have some other mechanisms like let me just take my pointer. We have the mechanisms like technology, knowledge, experience that facilitate also the function of the business operator. So based on this technique, we have some models for the supply chains in Norway and Iceland. And we look at the seafood value chain as a whole, both for aquaculture and fisheries. And we look at, of course, the loss volumes and so on. And when we look at the catch, harvest, primary processing, secondary processing, and until the storage, all the losses are or waste streams are termed as food loss or rest raw materials, as we call them. And all the losses from the retail or the transport and consumption are food waste. And there are different regulations also on how these different streams can be used further for applications for food, feed, or other applications and so on. And since we had more insight into the whitefish sector, both from Iceland and Norway, we chose to use this as a case study to compare both. But we also have looked at aquaculture to look at the value chain currently and the rate of utilization of the resources and so on. Although the Norwegian industry has come a long way, and the Icelandic aquaculture industry has comparatively been quite new, and like Nina also mentioned, the infrastructure for handling the rest raw materials or core streams today are not really in place. So we feel that comparing the whitefish sector is more beneficial for our study. So just a few key facts about the cod fisheries or the whitefish fisheries. The total catch in 2021 for Norway was around 0.6 million tons, whereas in Iceland it was 0.4 million tons approximately. If we look at the resource utilization, so the percentage of all resources that are caught, that are utilized for purposes for food and feed and so on, are 56. in Norway, whereas 44% currently is not utilized or not handled and processed further, is lost at sea or lost during within the supply chain. Whereas in Iceland, we have observed that 80% of all resources are utilized today. If we look at the different products and the composition of how the different products are either stored or exported and so on, I confirm the same finding that Nina had, that we export majorly whole fish, both in fresh and frozen form, and hence do not really have the access to the rest raw materials that can be used for value creation. Although Iceland has more processing and more filleting of white fish, there is still a significant volume that's exported whole, either in fresh or frozen form. This is just a snapshot of the model that we have. Here we see the whole supply chain and the different stages and all the different mechanisms and the inputs and outputs that I earlier showed. And if we just zoom into the primary processing and processing of rest raw materials and transport, it looks something like this, which is still not so easy to follow, I understand. But I will just quickly tell you that these lists of points that we have are the control mechanisms or the different regulations that control the function of this stage. We have these different colored arrows that are the inputs of either air, water, energy, packaging material, and so on. And then we also have the main input of either a bycatch or rest raw materials going into these functions. I will also zoom into the harvest later, but before that, I can just briefly say also about the different regulations on food and hygiene for processing. Also, the control mechanisms that are from the market side, that's the market demand and prices, and also the act on handling and processing and distribution of marine products, that's in Iceland, for example. There are also some technologies or digital solutions for keeping track of the origin of the fish and so on, and also some sensors for grading the fish and so on that control this. We also have some emissions of waste from these processes, and of course we have the main product that's also the output of these processes. A bit onto the harvest for Norway, we see that there are several regulations and the quota system in place to control how harvest is carried out and what are the obligatory requirements also during landing. And we have the main catch, rest raw materials, and bycatch, which is landed, and we have the fuel and energy and so on, which are the major inputs into the harvest operations. For Iceland, what we do observe is a little different, is that there can be a step before harvest where there is production planning or an order for catch. This is mostly common in vertically integrated companies where they have the same company having the fishing fleet as well as the processing facilities, and there is communication between before the landing and the harvest phase where there can be a production planning stage. However, in Norway, we observe that not many companies are vertically integrated, and hence this production planning step or function is not as common as in Iceland. Further on, we look at the critical points for the food loss and waste, and also the points where rest raw material occurs. And this is mostly for the seafood supply chains, including fisheries and aquaculture, although we have been focusing more on the fisheries here. Some of the drivers for the food loss and waste can be poor catch technology, the fishing gear that can damage the fish and result in some lost volumes. There also has been issues regarding storage space and freezing equipment on the processing trawlers. And hence, there can be discards at sea, mostly of the rest raw materials such as heads, livers, and so on. At the processing facilities, due to some limitations for storage and so on, as well as the issues regarding work catch technology and transport, there can be some quality defects or the issues with shelf life, which can cause also some losses of finished products or restaurant materials. We have also found out that there can be some drivers related to the cold chain and transport, and hence there's also spoilage of fish leading to some losses. There can also be human or mechanical error during processing and handling of fish, which can result in spillage, and hence we can lose completely edible fish, for example, if it has fallen on the floor or has been some technical error in the automated machines. It has also been reported that improper packaging or storage management can also lead to some losses of finished products. And if we look at the quantities, how much loss there is from the different stages, we have found that there is very little information or not much information that we could use at all from the catch and harvest side. Not much is reported today on how much is discarded or how much is lost during the stage. For processing, based on Norwegian data, we have observed that the loss volumes can be between 0 to 3%. And this is both the finished products or rest raw materials. We also do not have much information during the storage and the transport phase, but we have some data on the retail that says that the loss percentages for seafood in general can be between 10 to 12%. And the main drivers, as we also saw in the previous table, can be related to technology or storage management. But there are also some drivers that are related to profitability, where there is less willingness to pay for the rest raw materials, and hence these are discarded at sea and not landed and then processed further or handled further. And there are some regulations also on the quality of rest raw material or the source of rest raw material, and hence this cannot be used further for some particular applications. So this also affects again the profitability and can result in some losses or waste volumes. And I can also mention that we have in another project looked at the environmental impacts in terms of kilogram of CO2 equivalents from the processing stage, and then we compare it to the retail stage, and we can see that the environmental impact increases if the waste is occurring at the retail stage rather than the loss occurring at the processing stage, because also that Nina mentioned, more and more energy and materials have gone into the supply chain to make the product available at retail. So there's a higher environmental impact associated with this. Not all, of course, losses and waste volumes are not utilized. There are some that are still utilized for some purposes. So although they cannot be used for food directly, if they are within the category 3, that's the low risk category according to the animal byproduct regulation. These can be the heads, trimmings, and spillage, and so on. They can still be used for feed for food producing animals. In terms of aquaculture, if there is self-dead fish, this can be considered as a category 2 and could be used for biogas mainly, but we have got information that it could be also used for feed for producing animals, but not food producing animals. And if there are fish from sources like during disease breakouts or some hazardous materials and so on, or food waste from wholesale, this often is considered as a high risk category and hence cannot be used as a feed for either food or for producing animals, and is to be treated as municipal solid waste and hence goes to either incineration or landfill. So just to compare the status between Iceland and Norway, we observe that there are more vertically integrated companies in Iceland, whereas in Norway we have less vertically integrated companies. That the catch operations and the processing and so on are carried out by separate companies. When we look at the regulation or the control mechanisms for the harvest and landing, we see that it's obligatory to land certain fractions of the restaurant materials in Iceland, whereas in Norway, it's not obligatory today. Iceland exports about 64% of the volume as fillets, whereas in Norway, we export majorly as whole fish, only 7% as fillets, and hence also have no access to the restaurant materials that are exported along with the whole fish. Iceland has more focus on high value products from the restaurant materials, mostly for applications within pharmaceutical industry or fashion and so on. Whereas major volumes of the restaurant materials in Norway are utilized for lower value or medium value products that are going to animal feed or supplements, health supplements, and so on. The resource utilization degree is around 80% in Iceland, whereas in Norway we observe it's 56%. So with both having a goal to reach 100% utilization, we do see that Iceland is further compared to Norway. And some of the barriers that we have identified, which can be both common for Iceland and Norway, are technology on the fishing fleet on board. That's also the technology to process and handle and store fish, and also space available to accommodate the restaurant materials. There is low profitability and less willingness to pay in the market, and hence also not facilitating to develop the technology more on the fishing fleet. Some regulations on the use of byproducts or the restaurant materials also can lead to challenges to reach particular markets where the quality requirements can be quite high. The information flow in the value chain also is a barrier. There is traceability one step up and one step down in the value chain, but not necessarily across the whole value chain. And this can be as a barrier when it comes to determining the quality or the origin of the raw material and so on. There's also lack of monitoring and recording of temperature and quality at all the different stages, and this can definitely be improved if more and more material has to be used for high value applications such as pharmaceuticals or for cosmetic products and so on. So to answer the question again, can higher utilization be achieved? Yes, it can be achieved with a few measures, mostly within the data and information sharing. Better data on the status of the food loss and waste volumes today, degree of utilization, and what are the drivers of these losses today. Also, information sharing between the fishing fleet and processors, especially for Norway, can definitely help plan the production better and maintain the quality and use all the different co-products as well as the main products in a more efficient way. Technology development in the fishing fleet, the processing technology on board fishing fleet definitely can be improved. Also to process the restaurant materials while they are fresh rather than freezing them or landing and then processing them and so on. And as well making it cost effective. By focusing on markets with higher willingness to pay and higher value addition from the products can also facilitate higher utilization and so on. So just to summarize our work, in general, we see that the percentages of losses during processing, where we do have some numbers, it is quite low. It's like I mentioned, within 0 to 3%. The largest waste volumes are at the retail, and the highest environmental impacts are also at the retail. When it comes to the resource utilization, also upstream, Iceland has come further than Norway, and also focusing more on high value added products. Although we do need more data and transparency going on to be able to track our progress and to be able to benchmark the performance of the different companies or the different sectors and so on. And higher utilization can be achieved through technology development and better information flow. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Radha, for such a thorough presentation. Yes, and now I would like to open the floor for directed questions. Alan, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Radha. Very interesting presentation. Thank you very much. So I was wondering about this, the stuff about this willingness to pay. So it seems that when we spoken to some of the manufacturers within the rest raw material, so basically the ones who do collagen and vitamins and all this stuff, that they actually have one of the biggest challenges is the sourcing, because lack of material, so rest raw material. So how does that relate? I mean, what is the business potential, and how do you see this develop? Because it seems that there should be some willingness to pay them for this.
Yes, so I think that the willingness to pay could be higher for some market applications, which is, for example, for collagen and so on, but they also have high quality requirements. And for that, they would need to improve the technology on board, or the communication between the landing operations and the processing operations to maintain the quality and so on. So there is perhaps a lack of in a way, there needs to be a marketplace to be able to connect these together.
And so you feel that the market is not, I don't know, I'm not an economist, God knows, certainly, but it seems that the market then is not, I mean, it doesn't really have the normal conditions of being a perfect market or whatever an economist would say. So it seems that there are potentials for making better use of the rest raw material there, maybe by better processes, for instance, during the landing. So in the transport and whenever you are like treating the catch and making taking it ashore, and then the pricing and the availability or the transparency in how much is being landed is not really there either, because then they would probably the transparency of the sourcing people from these companies.
Yeah, I do feel that the transparency about what is the volume that's going to be available, and how can the collagen producers get hold of this volume, and also what quality it would be, whether it could fill the requirements in terms of any certifications that they might need or any quality requirements they have, might not be really transparent. Also, it could be that the sourcing could be the issue, is because, for example, in Norway, we do export major of the fish as a whole, so we do not really have access to the skins or the heads and so on that could be used for collagen production. So once it has reached the export markets or the consumer markets, my information here is limited, but it could be difficult to get hold of this resource once it is outside the Norwegian borders. Yeah, but I think there are other people with good comments, perhaps, on this.
Thank you, Shraddha. We will go now to Paki, please. You had the first hand raised. I will unmute you, maybe. So I have you as Office Paki. I have no other name.
Oh,
so
okay,
maybe
you were talking about
you would like to share your name?
Yeah, my name is Haldur. I am sitting in Iceland. I think this was very interesting presentation. Thank you. And especially what I found interesting is the difference between Iceland and Norway. My thoughts are, is it still like that in Norway that processors, they cannot own more than 49% in a fishing vessel that holds quotas, fishing quotas?
Yeah, I'm not too sure about this, so I would ask for any of my colleagues here if they could help me out with this.
If that is the case, I think this is the major explanation of why Iceland is further into this. A fish processor, they can own the quota and they can have full control from the first source before the fish is caught, actually. And I was also thinking about the salary cost in comparison in salary cost in Norway and Iceland, if that might have an effect. In Iceland, we have also this fish market system. The logistic are more easier than in Norway, of course. And of course, those who have own quota and processing plant, we have special governmental pricing system. So they are not paying the highest market price. So there's just thoughts about all this. Thank you.
Yeah. One difference we have observed is that in Iceland, landing the byproducts or the rest materials or bycatch, there is certain payment, so financial incentives for that, which is lacking in Norway, and hence also there is lack of incentive to bring it to land or land these byproducts. But I'm sorry, I'm not really aware of this limit for the quota on the Norwegian side. But I will note this down and we will explore this further. Thank you for the input.
I think this might be the major key.
Right.
In this.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that comment. More things for Shraddha to do after the webinar. I will move now to Magnus, please, your question.
Yeah, it wasn't really a question. It was more to just add to the discussion, but it's driven mainly the use of the byproducts also are the restaurant material by the customs duty and the low share of the processing in Norway. So the prices have been on an upswing in the recent years for also separated landings of restaurant materials. But for now, it needs to compete out the customs duty that exporters are meeting in the EU, especially the EU market. So it doesn't make sense for them to pay, like to land this on the first hand for the fleet on the first hand level at this stage. So, and there's no obligation to land it either. So the ones that are doing it are making money, commonly the silage or the meal and oil, which is directly competing with the land processing of meal and oil from mainly the pelagic species. But especially now in 2 last years with the high demand in the fish oil market, they are receiving quite high prices as well. So this is a driver. But they are using more, like the coastal fleet is delivering everything round almost. So you have the heads, you have the guts or the viscera, you have all the fractions. But the seagoing fleet out there for 2 to 3 weeks compared to in Iceland, the large vessels are going out for a couple of days and then returning. The Norwegian seagoing fleet fills up the limited storage room also with the $100 bills instead of the $5 bills, which is heads versus fillets. So it's an easy calculation for them to prioritize such fractions over the other ones when there is no regulation on this. So yeah, I think that's the picture we have. And about that 49%, I think you might be right on this, because there is certain regulations in Norway that vessels who are attached to a municipality or county is obligated to land in the various small landing facilities in that area. And we have so many throughout the coast. I'm not sure of the number, but there was also talks about or discussed about the travel distance to transport all of this. And compared to Iceland, we have quite a long coastline. And if everything is landed in the north, which is the case for a lot of the fisheries, you need to transport it and gather it from all the different islands and small places, and it's a costly process. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Magnus. Before I give the word to Sigurdur, I would just like to say that now we have opened the floor for questions on the overall theme and also for Nina. So if you would now have the chance to also inquire, Nina, please go ahead. Now is the time until basically 5 minutes before 12. Sigurdur, go ahead.
My question is kind of observation as well, but either Nina or Shraddha can, or anyone in the panel can reply. It's the license to operate. When you get the license to go out and catch fish, should it be basically required that everything that you kill is brought to shore and made some value out of it? So the license to operate question is basically, is it logical that you get out there and you don't get the maximum environmental impact from what you are killing? It's a live resource. So it's a question, maybe a theoretical question. No, maybe nobody wants to answer it, but that has been a driver in Iceland for a while, that people having the quota right actually have a social demand that they have to make maximum value from whatever they kill in the natural resource. So it's an observation if anybody wants to take up this dialogue of license to operate, because it's a crucial question for the future. Why should we fish?
Thank you very much, Sigurdur, for such an enticing and potentially controversial question. So I had one hand that disappeared, but I have Shraddha. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that the response from the fishermen would be that the discards at sea are actually being eaten by seabirds, and that it actually promotes biodiversity and so on. But again, to the background that we are in a food crisis and we would need to utilize more and more of the resources that we are able to get hold of. So considering this, yes, definitely it should be that whatever we are spending in terms of fuel and energy and so on should be towards making all resources available to either food or feed and not discarding it at sea, where we are really not being able to quantify the positive environmental impacts. Yeah, for example, of seabirds. Yeah.
Thank you, Shraddha. Magnus?
As far as I know, if they get any bycatch that is still somewhat alive or is able to, from their perception, to live on, they're obligated to let it go. But if it's not perceived any livelihood to continue in the sea, they need to bring it to the shore. But we don't have any, they don't report on this, we don't know this. But concerning the discards of the restaurant material, they are bringing in the main product, but then discarding, of course, the restaurant materials, at least for the seagoing fleet, quite a significant share. But as far as I know, this also happens in Iceland. So, yeah, it's what it is.
Nina, go ahead.
I think regarding the discards, what we're seeing in Iceland is with better technology like drones, we can better quantify it. So this might be something that will happen more and more in the coming years. Because discards are actually not allowed anyway, so.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Oh, again? Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I just have to say that the quota systems are not perfect. I mean, if you are trying to maximize the value of your kilo that you have of cod, and you go out and fish small cod and big cod, what do? If you have to maximize what you want to get out of it. So there's this discard problem that we have not been maybe willing to face for a long time. And maybe that could have some effect of how well have we been able to build up our fish stocks. Although we have had quota system since 1983-4. So we just have to have open eyes in our blue economy world. Hey, sorry.
Thank you very much. Anyone else that would like to make a question?
I can just add a remark that also, as I was mentioning before, there are now the Norwegian landings of mackerel is now going more to fish oil than human consumption even because of prices. So they're outbidding the human consumption application of mackerel for fish meal and fish oil. Yeah, what do we think about that? So.
Anyone wants to chime in? But maybe
I'm not sure about Iceland, how it is there, but I guess it would be somewhat the same about the prices for the two different ones.
If I'm honest, I don't know where we stand with mackerel, because I haven't looked into it since some time ago. I do know that the Norwegians regard us as pirates for even fishing it. So
yeah, this stock has not been harvested in a good way the last couple of years. So,
yeah,
but with the fish meal and fish oil market being so hot with the El Nino factor, it will be crazy in a couple of years, because now they have stored quite a lot in the last years to prepare, but the storage is running out, running empty. So yeah, let's see what happens if suddenly you have less for human consumption, or what happens.
And also the stock is moving more north. And
on the mackerel situation, you have to observe the situation in Ukraine, and the main hidden market is Belarus, but we are not supposed to, because of the war, to be selling our fish into Russian sphere. But that's why there is a drive for more fish oil and fish meal, because the aquaculture industry is needing. So it's a global issue as well in terms of the war situation. So that is having effect on the market, and the market for mackerel products, some of them have been Eastern Europe, and the war situation for the last 2 years might explain what you're mentioning, Magnus. So there is a issue, and that will not go away until much later. So there are other factors at play as well.
Yeah, the war might be a factor, but I think this El Nino is much harder or much more impactful than, and Norway is actually still selling what you call it, like juveniles for the Russian domestic production. Not sure how smart this is, but I won't go into that. But yeah, but about the fish meal and fish oil concerning the Russian production, I don't think that is so big yet. I think it's the El Nino factor which is really impacting here. But it could be a driver as well, of course.
So maybe a question for all of you: what would be the trends that you see in the coming 5 to 10 years on the overall? To Nina, to Shraddha, but also to the rest of you. What do you think are kind of the most striking elements we should be looking out or prevent in any case?
I think regulation is going to be tightened. I think that's obvious with sustainability regulation in the EU and the taxonomy regulation that Siki mentioned earlier. So I think that's going to be tightened. We're seeing proposals at the European Union level on other issues as well that are connected, like banning labels that are not certified, things like that. So I think that's going to be the driving trend in a couple of years. And it should be noted that because we talk about the European Union when we talk about environmental regulations, but if you look at sustainability reporting in general as a global phenomenon, it's becoming mandatory all over the world. It's not just the European Union trend. It's everywhere, especially in Asia and so on. So.
Interesting. Shraddha, would you like to add on from your side?
If we look at the first few stages of the supply chain, I would think that more and more digitalization and use of digital solutions for registering data and so on could perhaps facilitate better availability of data and transparency, and hence help in having more predictability of what are the species that are available, how much volumes are we expecting, and the production planning in the supply chain can be better. And also monitoring, like Nina was saying, monitoring with drones or having cameras on board and so on. I know there's research being looked into that, having sensor technology also on board to monitor the quality and the size of fish and so on. This could also perhaps help in reducing the discards at sea and having more and more motivation to bring it to land. And could also, of course, help in policy development to completely make it obligatory to land all the restaurant materials also. And again, on the retail side, I have to say that if for the seafood processing, we have seen that the losses during processing are quite low. And even if we do lose some of the volumes during processing, it is still used as feed or for food producing animals or for producing animals. So it is really not wasted in a way. It is still used for other applications, but it is the retail side or the consumption side where the waste is not really being used for any other applications than just energy production. So this is where the more focus should be going on also to reduce the losses at retail, and whether the consumer perception of what is fresh versus what is frozen and refreshed and so on also needs to be changed. And of course, shopping habits and so on. Although this is, I do understand, out of our scope within the SmartChain project, but this is something that the research in the future should focus on.
Maybe I can add one element that I think is important to think about. It links to the taxonomy regulations and transparency and digitalization. It is the question of consumer power in a way. They want to have food security, they want to have cheap food, but when people start to think about the true cost of food, all of the subsidies going for petrol and fuel for the vessels in the European Union, for example, the oil is being paid for partially by the public, and the true cost of food is never transparent to the consumer. So this is going to be a driver, maybe not in the next 5 years, but in the near future, if we can afford to feed ourselves. So we don't know what the situation will be. So the true cost of food is we probably are not selling the food to the consumers at more than 2/3 of the actual cost when you take in all the streams that go into the food production. So food is too cheap. That's my only observation.
Well, we're running out of time. Maybe we do end with a controversial note, but I can ask before we go, if everyone could open your cameras to take a picture of us all, if you would not mind that, and we could try to do that. Let me see if I am able. Yeah, yes. Pernilla, yeah. Ali, Anna Sophia, Lucina, thank you very much, because then we can have a nice momentum from this very good discussion. Yes, sorry, oh, I'm sorry. Let me try to go about this again. No. And yeah. And here we are. Any other thoughts before we go? Anything else for these final minutes you would like to leave a note? If not, I will take these final moments to thank first and foremost our presenters, Nina and Radha, for amazing and thought-provoking concepts you brought us, of course, to all the participants and their questions and their insights and comments that were extremely valuable. From my side, I will let you know that as this has been recorded, I will share with you the outcome of the recording so that you can later on share with others that you think that they might be of interest. I would like to also let you know we will have other webinars coming up potentially next year, as well as a public event in Trondheim coming up also early next year that we would love to already invite you. Maybe you find other reasons to come to Trondheim, but at least you might have one already for it during winter of 2024. Please feel free to contact me, Nina, or Shraddha if you would like to have more insights or comments on both of their presentations, or if you'd like to know more about SmartChain. And is there anything else you would like to know? If not, then we finish a little bit earlier. I would like to thank you once again for taking the time, and I hope that this webinar has had good consequences and was a good event, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, and have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.